Hey there. Today we're going to talk about the 4 things that you can do, 4 steps you can do before the opportunity arises or the need strikes to position yourself for career shift success. Now, this could be moving up academically or moving up within your private practice, your practice group, or this could be a shift to something separate, a non-clinical role, or really any kind of change that would require you to take on a leadership position or demonstrate a different skill set. Right? Because what I hear from physicians all the time is, well, but I'm not trained to do anything else. I don't know how to do anything else. Now, most of us have trained for a decade or more in something specific, and so it's easy to imagine ourselves and to view ourselves as very unidirectional. But I'm here to talk today about how that's just not the case, and to help you to begin to think about yourself in a different way so that you can articulate your skills that you do indeed have to the person who may want to hire you in a way that makes it very obvious and connects the dots that you can meet their needs. So this is stemming off of some questions that have come out of this mini course that I'm doing right now called Industry Insider, all about finding your transferable skills, articulating them, crafting an industry-friendly resume, understanding the interview process, doing the networking that you need to do so that you do know somebody. And so the real question that kind of keeps coming up again and again is, well, what do I do when I am not trained to do anything else? I don't have another degree. I haven't had any other formal experiences. But if you dig a little bit, I know that you will know that you have a lot of the 4 things. So let me dig into them right now. So number 1, you've got to identify your leadership skills, right? You have to identify leadership skills. Here is Rory making his cameo. There we go. For those who are just listening on the audio, it's my big cat, and I can't shoot a video without him joining. Okay, so leadership skills. You've got to identify the leadership skills. A lot of people are calling these soft skills, but as you probably know, they're increasingly recognized as being really, really vital, and that they aren't soft at all. They're really the cornerstone of being an effective leader, and they are the backbone of most of the transferable skills that you have. Now, there are so many transferable skills that are really, really important in both leadership roles, administrative type roles, as well as in non-clinical roles that you have already gained competency in, right? But you haven't really thought of yourself in that way. So in the very first week of the Industry Insider, we went over 10 that I think are applicable to everybody. I'm going to give you a few of those right now. And we even dug into some specific ones that were surprising because we did an audit for course participants and talked about people who are in solo practice who didn't feel like that demonstrated any skills, but we corrected that. And someone who is a blogger on the side and what that type of skill brings to the table. But when we think about sort of the general leadership skills and transferable skills, they're all sort of oriented around your thinking and your handling of situations, right? So generally speaking, you have good communication skills. Now, you may or may not have a great bedside manner. Everyone thinks they do. I hope you do. But more than likely, you have good communication skills because you've had to do one of the following, right? You've either had to quickly establish some rapport with the patient, that you haven't had a whole lot of time to spend to be together and to establish a trusting relationship. You have had to either communicate across the disciplines or across your own organization in an effective way to either advocate for something in your department or to explain to a colleague sort of the status of their patient that you're participating in their care. You have probably had to give some type of educational seminars, whether that be a formal grand rounds or whether it just be a little training internally for your group. You may have done things on a much, much bigger scale. Communication doesn't sound like it's that important. I think a lot of people sort of take for granted that they could be a good communicator, but in business and in leadership and in administrative roles, in those kinds of things, it's extraordinarily important to be an effective communicator, not just to be able to, to deliver a talk or to be able to have, good conversations with people. But these communication skills, delivering bad news, having challenging conversations, having a conversation that's uncomfortable because of either a personal relationship or going up against sort of what feels like a real or perceived hierarchy. These are real skills that you likely have because of sort of the nature of medical training. So also, of course, team leadership. Now, whether or not you are officially a leader or manager of anybody is a little bit irrelevant. It's what matters is whether or not you can demonstrate that you have effectively led a team. And I promise you that if you look back at your life's work, you have done that. Also, you have been an effective team player at some point. So I'm going down ones that sound pretty basic. And again, we went into the top 10 things about strategic focus, resourcefulness, things about organizational skills. Almost every doctor says they have none and that their life is a big shambles, but I challenge you on that. That's absolutely not true. So you want to find those leadership skills, those transferable skills, and kind of get a handle on them. And if none of them come to mind, then I want you to think about some of the challenging situations that you've had at work and kind of describe those. Maybe write them down in a journal or something, or think about a time that you had big kudos from your colleagues, whatever that was. Think about the things that come easy to you that other people find hard. And so people come to you to do those things. These are the kinds of sort of creativity sparks that will help you to begin to understand where you fit with these transferable skills. And again, I think for the sort of top 10 in terms of organization, leadership, prioritization, resourcefulness, integrity, trust building, strategic focus, being able to negotiate outcomes, resolve conflicts, all of these things you likely have done. So that's really important. When you're thinking about, and this is number 2 here, when you're thinking about those leadership skills and the transferable skills, and you're thinking about what you do on the day-to-day, another objection that I hear from many physicians who say, no, I'm not trained to do anything else, I don't know how to do anything else, is because you're thinking about your work in terms of tasks. And you should stop that. You've got to zoom back out. So of course, every day taking care of patients is very task-oriented, right? There's a lot of repeated tasks, in fact, right, that revolve around conversations and physical exam and sometimes procedures, or maybe a lot procedures, and documentation and teaching. And so there's a lot of things that you do. I had someone say to me in one of these seminars that, well, all I do is, I work in sort of a walk-in clinic, and all I do is try to not write antibiotics when someone doesn't need them, right? That's like they're on the defense of antibiotics. And I had said to them, well, then aren't you really being a steward of resources? And I think they thought that was funny, but if you pause for a second and think about it, you really are. So there are significant ramifications to antibiotic overutilization. We all know this. It's very newsworthy even today, but we know that you've got antibiotic resistance. So there's important reasons to not prescribe those when it's not appropriate. And also there are limits to healthcare resources. Everything costs money. And so you are being a steward of the resources, not only in your clinic, but also for your patients and all their healthcare expenses, as well as the system sort of overall. So, when you're thinking about what you do, you want to zoom out a little bit and really think about it in terms of what is the purpose of what I'm doing? What is, being affected? Am I making decisions? Am I, persuading other people? Am I educating other people? Am I holding to accountability? What are you doing in those tasks? Because you're right, tasks don't transfer that well, right? Unless you want to do something that is exactly in line with what you're doing now, to take your current skill set and apply it in the same type of place in another place, then those skills transfer great. But what you need to identify for your moving up or you're moving on out, is what kind of character traits and leadership skills your daily tasks reflect. So that's the second thing, really, is to zoom out and stop thinking of what you do every day in terms of tasks and start instead to think about, well, what is the purpose of that task? And what is the greater meaning of that task? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And when you start to ask those questions and maybe ask them a few times, you'll begin to uncover what is actually, it's important work. And that, of course, that your work is important. But a lot of times people get lost in the mundane detail and they feel like, well, this part of my job isn't important, or that part of my job isn't important, or is only, just, it is in and of itself the task. That's almost never true. That's almost never true. So learn to view what you're doing in terms of competencies and not in terms of tasks. Kind of zoom out to the why you're doing it and why that benefits people. Now that leads to number 3. You've got to understand the need for the position that you may ultimately want. So when you're thinking about the leadership position that you may want within your hospital, within your organization, within the school of medicine, within industry, medical device, pharma, insurance, whatever it might be, you've got to understand what their need is when they hire a physician leader, right? When they hire a physician leader, they want a certain output, right? They're hoping that you will do a certain thing. The thing isn't mysterious. It's easy to find. You can spend a little bit of time on LinkedIn or Glassdoor and see job postings for various medical director type roles and get a sense for what is needed. Now, at first to you, it might look kind of like Greek because It's often not framed in a language that we use every day in clinical practice or in academic practice. That's really important. And this is why you have to do it in advance of being ready for your career shift opportunity, because you need to understand what those needs are from the perspective of the person who might be hiring you into a totally different world. And when you understand what their needs are in the words that they have used, then you will understand how to back up to your own competencies and your own leadership transferable skills, and understand how to frame what you have done, what your successes are, and what you do legitimately bring to the table. You'll be able to frame that up in language that matters to the person who's considering hiring you. So it's really, really important to have this kind of all locked down. It's not something that you can do on the fly. So if you're even marinating on the idea of wanting to, kind of go for something bigger at work or go for something different outside, it's very important to start spending some developmental time looking at what are the needs for physician leaders, either within your organization or outside, or in other organizations that might resemble yours, right? Because we can learn a lot from that. There's going to be common themes, understanding what their needs are and linking those directly back to your own competencies that you've determined from kind of zooming out from your daily skills and your leadership skills, your transferable skills that everybody has. Then the fourth and final thing is be ready with stories. So don't make anybody else connect the dots. What I have just done here, and again, we've done it, that's the whole purpose of the Industry Insiders. We get really deep into how to do this in detail. But I think, you may be able to do this on your own if you think about it. The entire purpose of identifying the leadership skills, identifying the competencies, and making sure that you understand what the person who might want to hire you needs in the terminology that they use. This is all preparing you to basically build a repertoire of stories that show that you're not just talking the talk, but you are walking the walk, that show how you have illustrated those skills in the past, how your behaviors have demonstrated that you possess those skills. So when we first start talking about how to articulate, zooming out from the tasks and into the competencies, or we start to think about how what we perceive as just showing up for work really instead is the demonstration of a major leadership skill or transferable skill. When we start to talk about that, people feel very uncomfortable because they're not used to describing themselves in that way. But once you start to do that and you start to have this sort of doubt to say, well, I've made it sound like I've done, something big when I really haven't. That's sort of the imposter syndrome kicking in. You want to kick that out. You have done these things. And the way that you can prove it to yourself as well as the person who might be hiring you is that you will have stories. So again, if it's two different worlds and two different languages, it's very hard to have somebody else look at your competencies or look at your daily stories in the trenches of patient care and be able to, in their own minds, imagine how that applies to what they need. So this is your job. This is your job to do. That's why you need to know what they need so that you can say, I understand that you need ABC and I have XYZ, which solves that problem. And I can tell you some stories about how that's the case. So interviews and other conversations in sort of higher level leadership roles or outside in industry are often, nothing's an icebreaker. Nothing is sort of a softball. Everything has a purpose and an opportunity for you to show that you know what they need and that you're the person to do it, and to illustrate how it is that you have done that. Having said that, I want to clarify, and this is, I think, what we're going to be doing actually this upcoming session when we talk about how to put it into an actual resume. We've already talked about finding the skills and how to describe them and identifying them. But when you are articulating them in a resume, in a document, in a cover letter, or even in an interview or a conversation, it's really, really important to be able to effectively use the language that the hiring person is using, right? So you have to do the homework on the front end to figure out what do they really mean by that, and what are the examples that you have that you can demonstrate, and also spend a little bit of time polishing those up so that the devil's not in the details, right? You're not telling a detailed story about a patient encounter or a managerial experience or something like that. You've got to take it up a level, assuming that the person that you're speaking with has really no idea what your life is like on the day-to-day, and they don't. It's important to remember that they don't know what it is that you do or how that relates to these skills. So be careful when you're crafting your stories that you aren't too detail-oriented, and that instead you stay kind of zoomed out into that competencies, right? That there were sort of high stakes conflicts and that you managed to negotiate something, right? That is important. And that is a meaningful skill. If what you're talking about is sort of a disagreement between two specialists about what a plan is appropriate for patient care, that's what I just said, right? High stakes outcome where there were sort of differing opinions and you negotiated a conflict resolution. So a totally different way of saying that, but it's important. It is high stakes because it's a patient outcome. There are conflicting views. You got two specialists. One thinks this, another thinks that. That is a recipe for trouble. If a person can bring those three people together, right? Specialist, and patient, and help to come up with a desired resolution that is good for everybody, right? Or that at least weighs and respects the opinions and the input of everybody. Now you've negotiated a resolution to a conflict. And it is important, it is high stakes, it's very important to the patient, of course. And we don't usually use language like that to describe those encounters. We just come home and tell our spouse, I got in a fight with a colleague at work today about what we had to do for a patient. But that's not what you did, I hope. I hope that you took something up on a higher level and managed to have effective, difficult communication, right, to resolve either maybe it's not a conflict, but it's a differing view, and to come to the best outcome for the business, which in this case is the patient, right? The patient needs the best outcome. And perhaps if you're in a managerial role, you're thinking like your department needs the best outcome, the hospital needs the best outcome. Outcomes are different depending upon the stakeholders that you're talking about. But in all of these cases, if we zoom out and think about what is the purpose of what we're doing, what are the skills that we're using, what are the competencies that we're using, and what are the needs of the stakeholder who's about to hire us, there are many effective ways that you can use that language and translate what you do that you think of as a task or you think of just regular showing up for work, and show the value in that, the leadership in that, and the transferability in that, so that somebody will say, yes, I want you on my team. I know that what I am hiring a physician leader to do here, you have done because you've just told me some examples of how you've done it. So this is really important, to be able to illustrate stories, and again, higher level stories, right? Because people they can't imagine themselves in your same situation, and they don't want to get down into the details. They just want to know that you've got the skill set. And by the way, the doing of this helps to reflect your ability as a good communicator, right? Because you're essentially translating sort of one world to another. You're bridging two different sort of languages. And that's really an important skill set as well, because physician leaders are often the person who does that within the organization, right? To be the bridge between other medical professionals and non-medical professionals, or outside agencies that are not speaking in med speak, right? They want plain English, but they want your medical expertise. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but it's really, really important. So to recap, remember that the things that you need to do before it's time for you to look at that opportunity is think about the leadership skills that you have, and I promise you, you have them. I rattled off a handful of them, and we have even more, again, over in the Industry Insider, but you can just do a simple Google search for, transferable skills, and I promise you, at first glance, you'll think these are not important, but I'm telling you they are. And you'll also think, I don't have any of these, but I'm telling you, you do. And you'll find those by thinking about not your tasks, but the competencies that those demonstrate that you have. And then you're going to think about which of those are important for the type of position that you may be pursuing, the stakeholder being the person, or people that want an outcome from their medical leader. That might be multiple people, by the way. If you're within a hospital system, you're going to probably have, an economic stakeholder. You're certainly going to have patients as stakeholders. You're going to have employees as stakeholders. So there's a lot of different views that you'll want to consider. And then you'll want to take the time to think about the best examples that you have where you walk that walk, where your behaviors illustrated that you had that competency, those transferable leadership skills, and you want to be able to tell a story about it. A story that shows, what you were thinking at the time, why you did what you did, how it turned out, what you learned from it, how you might do it differently next time. These are the kinds of things that prepare you to have conversations, interviews, resumes, cover letters, email exchanges, and everything else that you need to position yourself for a successful career shift up or out of traditional clinical medicine. So if you're interested, we're in the middle of Industry Insider, and I'll leave the link below, but you can also just come check it out at any time because it is going to be an evergreen training. These are live webinars where, you know, people who are already registered can ask me questions in advance, but there's a curriculum. It's going to be there, and all of the information is still going to be the same whether you can join live or not join live. So I welcome you to come check it out. Even if you are not considering a major shift pivoting out, unless you're looking forward to a career of just sort of stagnation where you are, at some point you'll want to be prepared to move up, do something new, different, and something that will help you grow as a professional. So being able to do these 4 steps will help you to be able to position yourself so that it's sort of the aha moment that the person who's doing the hiring realizes right off the bat that you've got what they need.